Congressman from Northern Virginia, Republican, was Newt Gingrich's favorite congressman. Chad Peterson, obviously, he's the host. He's here. And Scott Servell is with us, serving in leadership in the state Senate for the Democrats. And Scott, great to have you with us. The Godfather and Ben Tribbett on their way. Gentlemen, great to have you.
Great to be here.
Yes, sir.
All right, we got a lot to cover today, and we talked a little bit about chat, but obviously what's on everybody's mind is the Kavanaugh confirmation, the impact it's going to have, and then after that, in this segment, we'll get to Redskins, Caps, Nats, Astros, and everything else about sports which is going on. I'm going to start with Tom Davis. Tom, the Kavanaugh situation, you're very familiar with this, making the sausage. There's a procedural vote today to end debate, and then the big vote tomorrow sometime in the afternoon. How do you see this breaking down, Tom Davis, and what is the impact going to be on the midterms?
Well, let's. I think he probably gets confirmed at this point. The FBI didn't find any corroboration, so I think you're going to get the Republican members and probably Joe Manchin. I think Manchin puts his reelection in jeopardy if he doesn't vote for it. Look, what this has done is it has lit a fire under more conservative voters and Republican voters. It's united the different wings of the Republican Party, the anti-Trump, the Trumpsters. Republicans do agree widely on a more conservative court. Why is that? Because the court has become the legislator. It used to be the legislator of last resort. Now it's almost the legislator of first resort because Congress has been so dysfunctional over the last couple of decades. Barring a party tsunami where one party can jam through their agenda, so you turn to the courts. So what we've seen in the last month is the enthusiasm gap, where Democrats had a double-digit advantage, has faded to almost nothing. That means your midterm turnout is going to be more even across the way, and particularly in red states, that's in the Senate races, that is benefiting Republicans. That's the way I read it at this point. A couple other things is the President Trump getting at least the concept of this trade deal with Mexico and Canada in tow is helping him among some of what we call Trump-centric voters, that he's able to deliver on this. Anyway, what's happened is Republicans have ticked up a couple points in the polling over the last month or so. Still a long way to go. Still going to be a tough midterm. But instead of a tsunami or a Cat 5, I think it's, at least today, there's 4 weeks to go, anything can happen. I think it's tamped down a little bit.
The Democrats are complaining that the FBI background check on Kavanaugh was not sufficient and that it was a sham. What is your position on that?
I think, well, I didn't see it, but I think they were going to complain unless they could go out and find some corroboration. I mean, this clearly, everybody made up their mind before they went out and checked this, except for maybe 4 or 5 people. So I don't know what enough is.
4 or 5 people in Congress or 4 or 5 people in the United States?
Yeah, you're about the same. So it was, look, we know that the strategy was let's continue to delay and to find something. Some of it's payback for Merrick Garland. I mean, neither party really acts responsibly on these judgeships. It's become now so that the court is viewed as a legislature. And the problem with that is as the prestige of the court goes down with the public, their rulings don't get the same level of acceptance. You look at the Gore and Bush and the court decision 5-4, and the Americans weren't out in the street the next day. That they just accepted it. I don't think you get that today. I don't think you get that with a polarized court. And as the institutions start to fade, there's some huge problems with that. I think we need to remember this. Why did Rome fall? Rome fell because the people didn't think they needed the government. They took it for granted at the end of the day, and it dissolved. We have a great system of government at this point, but for a number of reasons, it's kind of being abused by all sides.
There was a great quote, and I'm glad Tom referenced that Bush v. Gore opinion. There was a great quote, and I can't remember if it was Blackman or who it was, something about the real loser in this case is the American people and their view that the court is the impartial arbiter of the Constitution. And I think that is true. I think ever since that decision, which is now, looking backwards, 18 years ago, God, is that hard to believe? Mm-hmm. There's almost been a complete dissolution in the idea of, I mean, when I was a kid, the Supreme Court was a separate branch of government. The whole concept that you had Republican and Democratic justices was foreign. I mean, you couldn't, who appointed Hugo Black, who appointed, Earl Warren? I don't think really people tracked that. It didn't, and it didn't really seem to make a difference.
It
didn't impact results. And now you have a left-wing justice, a right-wing justice, then you have a swing vote, and it's been, yeah. I mean, for me as an attorney, I think it's been a very negative process, and I'm not quite sure how we reverse it.
Cap, let me just add to that. What we have right now at all levels, instead of a balance of powers government, we have parliamentary behavior in a balance of power system, and it doesn't work.
Scott?
Yeah, and
Servo.
Tom, I agree with the last point you said. I'm not sure the outcome is quite as fixed as you think it is. I mean, I know Flake and Collins indicated that they thought that the FBI investigation was adequate. I think that's kind of preposterous, given there was like 40 people that weren't interviewed who were asking to be interviewed, but they've at least indicated the investigation was adequate. They haven't said how they're going to vote yet. 2 days ago they were saying that they were appalled by the president's comments. They thought they were inappropriate. Whether or not what the president said at a rally ought to affect how you vote on a Supreme Court justice is a different issue. But I'm not convinced that the three of them are there yet. I can tell you that as a legislator, at least, and Tom, you've served in a legislative capacity, I don't find that legislators really appreciate getting bullied by the executive. Or
their constituents on elevators.
Yeah, well, some people,
or somebody else's constituents.
Somebody else's constituents. Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel like as an elected official, we're supposed to sit there and take it, and people are supposed to be able to beat on us if they're our constituents. But with when we went through Medicaid, the more our executive tried to bully the other side, the less people on the other side wanted to be helpful. And
I think there's some of that, and you are talking about independent people. But
right.
Let me. And Murkowski's won as an independent before. I assume. I mean, I love Susan Collins, but if she were to vote no, I think her option would then be running as an independent in Maine. I don't think she could get renominated. Look, on issues like this, I was there for the Clinton impeachment.
Right.
We all agonized, but eventually everybody went to their corners. You had 4 Democrats who voted for impeachment. They all became Republicans over the next decade. Mm-hmm. And you had 3 Republicans that voted for
Virgil, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you have one,
Ralph Hall.
Flake is on his way out.
Deal. I think Deal.
No, not Deal. Taylor, Mississippi.
Taylor, Mississippi. Right.
But also, the other piece that I haven't seen women this angry since right after Trump got elected and when he made the comments on the Entertainment Tonight bus. When all that came out. And
I agree with you, but they were already angry. You saw the Women's March, but Democratic intensity was already at an 11. What this has done is arouse it. In politics, when I chaired the campaign committee, we used to say, what issue will get our base going up without arousing the other base? And this is an issue that's aroused both bases, and it's red hot.
I'm not sure that the Republican intensity is maintained if Kavanaugh is confirmed.
Well, that was the point I was going to make. That I would agree with you, Tom. If Kavanaugh's, if he kind of did this tearful, said, I can't do this, my life has been destroyed, my family's been destroyed, I think Republican intensity would be white hot going into the midterms if he became sort of a martyr. But the problem is once he gets elected, assuming he gets elected, he may not, then isn't that issue kind of resolved?
Well, I think if he doesn't get elected, the intensity turns
I
up
agree.
even more.
If he doesn't,
keeping it going a month is better than keeping it going 18 months. So, and look, a lot of this at the end of the day is going to depend on how does the president comport himself in the last 4 weeks. Will he, if he can get a modicum of discipline and the like, I think it can be decent midterm for him. It'll certainly lose seats, probably lose the House, but that intensity is tamped down. The key body now is the Senate, because the new governance model is you govern through executive order and regulation, and then you get the courts to uphold it. Legislatively, unless you have 60 votes in the Senate, or you can find a way to get it through reconciliation, you can't govern legislative, and nothing happens. There are over 400 House bills stuck in the Senate right now. Many of them passed unanimously that'll never see the light of day.
Well, we'll see. I think Democrats will bring back earmarks, and you'll start to see some semblance of congressional organization again.
Well, we'll see. That'd be great. I think earmarks are a positive thing on balance.
Yeah. I did too.
So Scott, you seem to be the most partisan on this. Do you think there's still a chance that Kavanaugh doesn't get confirmed? Obviously, I don't know what Manchin's going to do. I kind of agree with Tom. If he wants to get reelected, he's going to have to vote for him. But let's say He doesn't. And Heitkamp in North Dakota didn't have a choice. She's down by 12. She can't win without the money. She doesn't vote no. She doesn't get the money. So she can't win anyway. So it doesn't really matter what she does. Now she can retire and go on CNN and make $50,000 a week or something. But so I don't know what Manchin's going to do. At the end of the day, though, they need to get 2 of these Republicans to vote no, right? So you never know what Jeff Flake is going to do. But I'm with Tom. I mean, Susan Collins basically would end her career, and so would Lisa. I mean, neither of them could ever get elected again as a Republican ever. And there's no evidence in the whatever you want to holler about the background, the research the FBI did. There's no corroborating evidence. So, I mean, on what basis, as a Republican, do you vote no?
By the way, I just got an email saying that the FBI investigation was a sham on my phone. So.
Okay. That's a shocker.
John, I take issue with you on the corroboration. We could debate that all day long, but I think there was plenty of corroboration. But
just give me one example of anybody that said I saw him do this. Just one example.
Third party corroboration, none. But I'm telling you, as somebody has to try these kinds of cases in court, there's a lot of different markers of better testimony, which would point to somebody who's being credible. So talking to the therapist about it 10 years ago, which apparently was documented in the therapist notes. I mean, who the hell puts themselves out there and puts themselves through this crap if it didn't happen? I mean, what are her motives? I mean, I don't see why she would have.
So you convict somebody based on what? Just
no, I didn't convict anybody. Evidence? But this guy's applying for the highest court in the land. He's not applying for a job at Domino's to deliver pizza. And I think that the burden that you have in terms of keeping somebody off of a lifetime appointment is entirely different than.
So anybody can make any allegation.
I'm not talking
no corroboration. And then you're done.
Nobody's talking about taking away the guy's liberty and putting him in jail. That's a different issue than it is.
So
trying to get a lifetime
anybody that
appointment.
the Republicans then that Trump would put up, somebody can come out and say he did something to me 40 years ago, have no evidence, no corroboration, and that's the end.
I didn't say something. I said sexual assault, which is an entirely different issue, and you got to put yourself in the context of the time and the place. And back then, in the 1980s, it wasn't something that people came forward. They don't come forward nearly as much today about as they should, but back then, when I was in high school, that kind of thing, people didn't. You just didn't hear about people getting prosecuted.
Scott, look, she was certainly incredible. I mean,
yes,
very emotional.
Right.
And I do think this. I think that taking that extra week and going back and interviewing some of the people, Mark Judge and others around it, I think it was the right thing. I think slam dunking this thing the day after her would have been terrible politics and would have been terrible on the institution. Having said that, nobody else can remember the party, who was there, how she. There are just too many holes to really make the case. That doesn't mean she's wrong, but that's a tough standard for the future. Anybody can come forward and say anything.
I appreciate that, but just I just want you to go back. Was it 6 days? And remember, after she testified, Chris Wallace on Fox News and the president too talked about how credible she was, and all the Republican operatives were texting everybody right after she testified. This is done. It's over. She's toast. And then 7 days later, we're all back to where we were. It's amazing to me how fast the world changes. But back to what we were talking about before we got in this corroboration sidebar. The last poll for Manchin, I think, had him up 15. I want to say.
No, there's not. He's up by 5 or 6.
No, I saw a poll last week that had him up 15.
That's the polls you read when they're asking you to donate money.
Scott, he's certainly up.
He's not up by 15.
But he's under 50. He's well under 50.
Well under 50.
And I think what you got to remember in this is if he votes no, his independence is his whole shtick. I think this is for him. This changes the outcome of his race. I think it's that intense.
And I'm not an expert on West Virginia, but it seems to me Joe Manchin's whole position is I'm an independent guy. I'm not beholden to either side, and I think it would be hard for him to get reelected. It would seem to me. And what did Trump win the state by? Like 50 points,
something like that. Yeah.
And I'm also not convinced that Susan Collins is going to run again either.
That I think is a good point.
I'm not either. But she's never voted against a Supreme Court judge ever. You have a group in the state that has put $1 million up, saying unless she votes against this guy, we're going to spend it. Yeah, okay, now it's up to $1.5 million. GoFundMe, but then it looks like a bribe. I think at the end of the day, without corroboration, she's going to be there for
when she up.
I agree with Tom.
She's not
2020.
Is she going to run again?
Well, she'll make that decision at the appropriate time.
I think Tom nailed it. I think she is going to vote yes. The one that I have no read on, though, Tom Davis, is Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. What about you?
She's pretty independent. I mean, just remember this: when she lost that primary to Joe Miller, she lost the Republican primary.
Right.
She run as a write-in with the name Murkowski.
That nobody could spell her name.
Yeah, but also,
and she won it at landslide.
But but part about the independence piece is when guys like Manchin win, it's because they frame their reelect in terms of looking out for their state, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Murkowski has a big issue with the Kavanaugh opinion about Alaskan natives. I think was something that she went sideways on.
She does on that issue. So no, it's not clear cut. I haven't seen the polling in Alaska. I think if you get Collins and Flake, and I think you're going to get Flake, he voted him out of committee. So I think without some corroboration that Jeff is fundamentally very conservative.
Right.
He's head of the Goldwater Institute. He's also very independent, and I think a very principled guy, which is why people think he's flaky, because he doesn't always stay in one box and isn't always predictable. But this judgeship, you got to understand, for Republicans, this unites us. This is a very important vote on the court, as it is on the Democrats on the other side. Wanting somebody else.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. Has a vice president ever broken a tie on a Supreme Court nomination?
Not
that I'm aware of.
Yeah, Scott, I don't think so. That would be unprecedented.
That would be.
But that could,
and then would someone challenge that?
But it still counts.
How do you know that? It just says the Constitution just says advise and consent, and there's got to be no.
But
case
the vice
authority
president, he's the president of the Senate. He votes in.
But he's not a member. I can tell you in the state legislature,
it's not Virginia.
State Senate rules.
It's not Virginia.
It's not Virginia. Oh.
Yes,
but there's already a lawsuit. There's already a lawsuit challenging the whole procedure.
Well, now the Democrats say though that if he's confirmed that they're going to and they take over the House or the Senate, they're going to move to impeach him.
That would be a disaster.
Yeah, 2/3 of the Senate. Good luck.
Yeah, it's just. I think he is going to get confirmed, and I'm kind of.
Elections have consequences. That's what I take away from this.
But here's let's get to the Republicans a minute.
So does stealing Supreme Court seats.
Well, elections have consequences. Trump won. You see, here's the problem. You guys still can't get over the fact that Trump won 2 years later. You still can't get over it.
Scott, let me make this point.
I'm talking about Merrick Garland.
Let me talk about Merrick Garland, who I think by every indication is a very honorable, straightforward, would have made a good Supreme Court judge in the traditional sense that he's balanced. He's not completely liberal. He was a Democratic operative before he won the bench, but met the criteria for a judge. But what is better, not holding a hearing on him or doing what they've done in this case? And that is putting the sham of hearing him and then finding a way to trash his reputation and voting no. They weren't going to confirm him. It was an election year. Republican senators weren't going to confirm Scalia's seat and putting on a more liberal member. It just wasn't going to happen.
In a presidential election year, not a midterm.
Who knows?
Because
who knows what the rules are, right?
Yeah,
Scott?
but
right.
Tom,
Nowadays,
it's the president. It's the president of the United States who nominates somebody for the Supreme Court, not the Senate. They're advising consent.
Correct.
So therefore, I think McConnell's argument is sound when he says, "Look, that was a presidential election.
Let's let the voters decide." That's. But I'm just saying they stretch it each time. I don't know who started this, but it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Mm-hmm. And once you do it for 1 year, you could do it 2 years, you could do it 3 years. I don't know. There aren't any guardrails on this. I think they moved it from 60 votes to 50 votes for everything but the Supreme Court. Of course, they're going to do it for the Supreme Court. There are no guardrails anymore on this, and that's what's scary.
All right, I got a text here from DJ, Republican operative in Virginia Beach, if there is such a thing. DJ says, Joe Manchin is only up by 4 in the latest Fox poll as of 2 days ago. Up by 4, not 15. So Scott needs to check his email, is what one of our listeners said. 888-480, John. 888-480-5646.
I may have gotten another email on that. Let me check that.
And Chap's got another email. We're here. The boys are back in town waiting on Ben Tribbett.
Breitbart says 4, so that must be... True.
Well, if Breitbart says it,
I just got an email saying Beto, what's his name? Beto is destroying Ted Cruz.
Beto's not going to win that. We're with Tom Davis, former Republican congressman from Northern Virginia, Newt Gingrich's favorite congressman ever. We've got Chap Peterson is with us. We're at Chap Peterson World Headquarters here in Fairfax City, and Scott Servell, state senator from Northern Virginia, Democrat, and part of Democratic leadership. He's not part of Democrats.
Chap's
part of leadership.
I'm not leadership.
Barely.
Yeah. Why don't you? But there is a rumor saying that if you challenged if you challenge the Godfather, that
I'm
people
not
are tired of him.
anybody. I don't know what you're talking about.
The Godfather's not here either. Dick Salzo, we're waiting on him. I don't think he's seen a 7 a.m. in a while.
Real Clear Politics average on Manchin right now is 9.4.
Well, that's a far cry from 15, though.
Here's one plus 12. September 13 through 15, Manchin plus 12. That's the one I was thinking of.
I mean, look, he is ahead.
Manchin's been consistently ahead. I think.
Yeah, he's been
Scott, I'll give you that. And I think a no vote here changes the dynamic. There was a poll earlier before all this controversy that showed that if he voted against it, all of a sudden the numbers change on him. This is a cultural vote.
I don't dispute the fact that the numbers would change, but from my perspective, I think a Kavanaugh confirmation is probably, in terms of Democratic enthusiasm, probably nets 5 to 10 seats and maybe a Senate seat or two. I mean,
well, I think it helps you in the House and it hurts you in the Senate because the Senate's on very red territory. North Dakota, Missouri. I mean, these are pretty solid states. West Virginia. In the Senate race, this Kavanaugh thing has helped Republicans.
All right, we're out of time for a couple of minutes. Got to get the bottom of the hour news. But one thing I think Tom nailed is this is the only thing I've seen since Trump announced that has unified Republicans. I've never seen anything like this. We couldn't figure out how to do it. We're going to talk about that. Plus, Redskins Caps want to get back. Keep it right here. The boys are back in town. Stay with us.
With SRN News, I'm Rich Thomason in Washington.